named Noah somehow found grace. That's phenomenal. It doesn't really give us a big explanation of how he did that. It just says Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Noah didn't find grace in the word of the Lord. He didn't find grace in what he had been told. He found grace in the eyes. So somehow Noah, in the midst of all this, after God had said, I'm wiping them all out, Noah was able to look into the eyes of God and find something that so moved God that he said, okay, this is the plan. I'm going to destroy the whole earth, but not your family. And this is what I want you to do. And this is how I want you to do it. And in that grace that Noah found, Noah did exactly what the Lord asked him to do. All right? So keep in mind, we're only 500 years from that event. So what's fresh still in the culture's mind? God will wipe us out. God, you mess with him and it's not going to go so well. So their perspective of how God interacts with humans is framed in the flood. Right? So we're going to talk about that in depth on another day. But this morning I'm just trying to lay some foundations. The other thing that I've really appreciated in my study of the book this time, which I don't think I've ever seen before, and for me it's been like one of the richest things I've discovered. Job represents a developing view of God and how he interacts with man. Again, we have a tendency to open up the book of Job and we start reading it, and we take what's on the page and we pull it into our framework today, and we read it that way. But that's not what's really going on in the book of Job. In the book of Job, there's actually human beings that are wrestling with the most basic of ideas, which is, how do you communicate with God? How do I even approach a God? It's not even fair. If he's God and I'm a man, how's this fair? I'm whooped before I even start. These are the fundamental issues that man are still wrestling with today. And these guys, we're given the privilege into this of these guys actually working this thing out. Now, it's easy to say, oh, well, Job's comforters, that's what we all need, or people like that. Well, listen, a lot of what they said was true. A lot of what they said you can read right in the Proverbs. You can read it in Ecclesiastes. You can read elements of it in the Psalms. So it's not that the guys didn't know what they were doing, and we're going to look at what was really going on. But the interesting thing is we're given a picture into what does it look like when human beings actually wrestle with some of the foundational understanding of this interaction between God and man. And the cool thing about the book of Job is we get God's answer at the end. It doesn't end with a question mark. It ends with God stepping in going, okay, guys, I think that's enough of that. Let me explain a few things. And so we're given God's perspective of what it looks like when we wrestle with these ideas, which to me is very empowering. Because it says it's okay to try to work out this stuff. We don't understand everything. We're still wrestling with certain things. And I'm going to talk about that at the end today. So Job represents and gives us this developing view of what God looks like 500 years after the flood. Okay, throughout the book, I think you're going to find, and we'll be concentrating on this in the weeks ahead, there's two fundamental views as I see it that develop in this dialogue that was going on. The first view, all things are fixed. Life is seen in a cause and effect manner. God has given the rules to live by, and if you follow them, you'll do well. And if you don't, life will break you. God isn't personal and is related to through living correctly. This view was held by Job's comforters. It's one of the primary themes of the book. Over and over again, they say to Job, if you were actually living right, this wouldn't be happening, because this doesn't happen to right living people. So I know you think that you're all white and clean, but the circumstances say you're corrupt and you're wicked and you're so full of pride you can't even see your own stuff. So that was their view. The second view is the one that was held by Job. And it says how a person lives is important to God, or how a person lives is important, but this God is that we serve is not removed, but has become accessible. Through the book of Job, through the book, Job's cry is to be able to talk with God and to be heard in his lamentation. To the first view, this seems proud and arrogant, that a person would feel they can talk and reason with God. That's where Job is. That's the cry. When you read through the book from start to finish, as Job makes his lamentation, that's his whole point. He's like, I know all this stuff is happening. I did what I knew how to do. I gave to the poor. I covered myself everywhere I knew how to cover myself. I lived to the standard that I knew to live by, and yet these things have come to me. So somehow in the midst of this, in this relationship with God, I don't know how to get there, but this God has to be accessible. Oh, if I could only stand before him and make my case, then I could persuade his heart to who I am. And of course, we see that fulfilled in the cross. But Job was catching that. Job somehow understood that I don't get it. My life is a mess right now. I've lost my whole family. I've lost my wealth. I've lost my health. I've lost all these things. But somehow in the midst of this, it's not God that is my enemy, and it's not God that's against me, but somehow I've got, if I can get to him, if I can talk to him, somehow if he'll allow me as a man to have dialogue with him, there's an understanding that we can come to. And the glorious thing is, at the end of the book, God liked Job's perspective better than his friends. God's like, I don't really mind your temper tantrum, just so it brings you back to me, because I want to talk to you. You know how it is raising kids. Well, go in your room. When you get yourself together, come back out and we'll talk. All right, fine. Bam! And you hear stuff flying around in there, and you're like, I ain't opening that door. I ain't going near that door. But eventually, they come out, and then you talk. God really doesn't mind that. And the book of Job gives us that. God in the end is like, listen, I want to have a real relationship with you. And real relationships are tense at times. And real relationships have places where we don't understand each other, but we don't quit. We push through to get to where life is, because that's more important. And God's saying, that's my heart. That's my heart. I got big shoulders. I don't have an identity issue. So I can handle whatever you say about me. Doesn't change me. I can do it. So those are the two views. The first one is everything is fixed. It's a matter of following the rules. You do the rules, you get the blessing. You don't do the rules, then you get the cursing in life. So life either goes good or bad, and it's always measurable by what's happening in your life. Unfortunately, many people in the church live that way today in the new covenant. And we try to put that on other people. And if you happen to come along and go, no, I just talk to God. I just talk. Like, well, you're crazy. You can't just talk to God. You can't? No, you can't just talk to him. I mean, what if you messed up today? Oh, I never really saw where that was a problem. Well, that's what I'm saying. You can't come to God like that. You just think you can do anything you want and then just show up and have a talk with him. Well, yeah. Yeah, you're crazy. That's not the way it works. I thought that's what the New Covenant said, though. Well, you misinterpreted the Scripture. It's a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. Well, it may be. I'm not trying to fall into his hands. I'm trying to sit in his lap. It's a lot different in Papa's lap. Yeah, you're crazy. You're crazy. That's false gospel. You're one of those grace people, aren't you? Ultimately, these two views in Job are the same two views that get worked out at Mount Sinai between the covenant that God wanted, which was relational, and the covenant that the Hebrews wanted, which is cause and effect. And they got what they wanted. And we see how well that worked. God's plan all along has been relational. Come and talk to me. I'm going to make you a priest. I'm going to give you total access to me anytime you want. You can just come and we'll talk. If there's something I need to talk to you about, I'll talk to you about it. If I need to bring a correction, I'll bring a correction. He's not afraid. The next point, 7, if you got the notes. Job represents the earliest biblical account of these views being worked out in open dialogue, and with God giving his view at the end. I already said that. Also, point 8, in my opinion, Job gives us the clearest view of the genesis of Hebrew or Eastern thinking that shapes our view of God and how we interact with him. I think this being one of the oldest books of the Bible in count chronologically, that the book of Job really shows us how Eastern thinking was developing right after the flood, and how that ultimately became a thinking that, we refer to that as the thinking of the Hebrew culture. But it's not just the Hebrews, it's Eastern thinking. It's the Hebrews, it's the Arabs, it's those that live in that area, as opposed to Western thinking, which is the rest of us with our goofiness. But I think Job, as you read through it, really shows how these things are really being formulated by people that are talking and dialoguing. Point 9, Job represents God's interaction with man before any covenant has been established. Because of this, Satan was operating in the earth in the fullness of the dominion which had been surrendered by Adam. This gave Satan access to people, which he began to lose once God started to establish covenants and set places of protection and establishing kingdom dominion to replace what Adam had surrendered. For me, this is a very critical point, because much of what Job talks about, people will use today to make it sound like somehow on any given day, Satan just walks into the throne of God today and say, "Hey, I want to talk to you about Job."
I don't think so.
I think you've been too good to him, giving him too much.
Probably.
He's gotten right uppity, but if you let me have him for a couple weeks, I'll show you what he's made of. Listen, I've had that said over and over again. Many people see that as being the reality. That is not the reality of the throne of God.
Right.
Satan has been cast down. This is a place that he's losing dominion. This is a place where he still has a level of dominion. This is a place where he still has a level of authority. But, beloved, this is it. He doesn't march into heaven and stand before God and do anything. He's been cast down. So in this place, we can't take the book of Job and pull it into today and say, this is the way it works. That's not how it worked. It's how it worked there. Job, being a patriarch or a contemporary of Abram, lived in a time when God had made no covenants. Well, I shouldn't say that. He didn't make the covenant with Noah, the covenant of the rainbow. But as far as making covenants with man in particular, no covenants have been made at that point. So here, Job, being outside of any covenantal relationship with God, and Satan being really at the pinnacle of the dominion that he held, Satan had sway much more than he has today. And so we can't say, oh, well, that's, when something's going wrong, well, the devil, God will never give you more than you can bear. Hey, I guess Satan went up and just, God said, all right, well, you can do this, but you can't do that. No. That's not a new covenant. And because it worked with Job is because there was no covenant. Even once covenants got established, even the covenant with the Hebrews that was flawed because they got what they wanted instead of what God wanted, still, once they came into covenant, the Hebrews came under a sphere of protection from the Father because they were in covenant. So now all of a sudden, enemies were held at bay, or enemies were surrendered. And when an enemy